Hey Nate,
Hello.
how are you doing?
Pretty good. How's it going?
Doing well, doing well. Thank you for joining today. We have a lot of students who have already joined. We'll wait for a few minutes before few more can join. I'm Yashraj Nayak. I'm the India Community Manager at Progate, and we are a coding learning platform from Japan. And joined by Nathan Knight, as you know from the banner. Nathan is joining all the way from California, United States. He would be able to tell more about him in a moment. And everyone, this ask me anything session, it's very casual, so don't, and it's more about you. It's less about us and Progate, it's more about you. So feel free to ask away any questions you have. It would be great if you can go ahead and introduce yourself to everyone.
Okay. All right. Can you hear me all right?
Yeah, loud and clear.
Okay. So hello, everybody. I guess it's kind of early in India right now in the morning. I'm in San Francisco. I'm Nathan Knight. It's nighttime here. Yeah, so I am a programmer, software engineer, currently based in San Francisco, working in Cupertino at Apple. So started out programming in college, actually. So I did computer science there, worked for a little while in tech, and then actually moved to Japan. And then in Japan, I wanted to live abroad and teach English actually for a few years. And then I got back into tech after that. So I was living out in the countryside, and I moved to, if you guys know Japan, to Kyoto, the ancient capital. And I was doing IT consulting there for a few Japanese companies. And I actually got to know, I actually knew before the founders of Progate, Masa and Kenta at that time. And I was in contact with them on and off, kept up with Progate and heard things were going well. And eventually got a contract with them and worked for them for a few months. And then they offered me a full-time position. And then I worked at Progate for about a year and a half, I think. And that's how Yash and I met, very fortuitously. And then from there, I got an offer from Apple and then moved for the work here. And I've been here about a year. So that's, I guess, a little bit about my professional life. Personally, I'm originally from Tennessee, which, if any of you guys know, it's the southeast of the United States, opposite side of the country from where I am now. Yeah, I love music. I love language, obviously. I love learning languages. So maybe someday I'll learn Hindi or Tamil.
Yeah,
Um,
that would be good.
yeah, I've actually never been to India. I was set to go to India with Progate, but I left just before that, sadly. So hopefully I'll go someday.
Sure
Yeah,
thing.
yeah.
Those who have just joined, good morning, everyone, again. And we are live with Nathan Knight. Yeah, so feel free to drop your questions in the comments. And apart from that, congratulations for finally making it to this live. Registering for something is one thing, and actually doing it is another. So you made it, and I'm sure a lot of you might be already learning new skills on Progate, outside Progate. You might be building some projects, and especially this time when all of us are kind of locked down in our houses, we can make the most out of this time to learn new skills. Whenever this thing will be over, we would have a lot more new skills and a lot more to talk about. That would be, I think, we can all achieve our goals after that. So yeah, we
Yeah.
have quite a good turnout. Shun has joined. We have a lot of
Hey,
students
Shun.
from India. Hey, yeah. So
Konnichiwa.
right. So Nate, let's start. Begin with the first question which I have. I actually have some questions for you, and apart from that, we'll take some questions from the students who have joined today. Uh,
Mhm.
yeah. So the first question which I had is, how did you learn to code?
Okay, so it's been, I guess a long journey. There's been a lot of different things that I've tried. So I started out, I did computer science actually, but I didn't start out studying computer science in school. I started out studying music and changed to computer science. So I had no background. A lot of people going into computer science in school they'll already have some background, like their parents were engineers or something. And I was always jealous of that, you know. But I just dove into it because just curiosity, really. I really liked it. It was like math, but you know, a little bit different. But the thing is about studying it in school is that you learn the theoretical aspects of it, right? So I didn't really feel like I could code. I didn't feel confident. So I actually got the opportunity to do an internship my third year of university. And I think that's where I really started to feel like, okay, I know what I'm doing and like I can start to build stuff a little bit, you know? So through that internship, I think was my real first step into actually doing coding myself, you know, not just following the schoolwork or doing something like that. That gave me a little bit more confidence. And then after that, I really started to go online and see the resources that are available online. And there really are so many more now than before. Like YouTube, for example, is a really great source if you like videos. And then there's like just the documentation for any general language, like Python docs are really good. Recently, I've been getting into a language called Elixir, and the docs for Elixir are really great. Swift is a good one. Golang is awesome. Yeah, and then so I really like actually the kind of interactive style, like Progate actually. So I used Code Academy, I used Progate, I used Free Code Camp a lot to brush up on different skills. But I would say out of all these different things I tried, really just building my own things, like making a lot of mistakes, making something that not many people used, probably just some friends of mine or myself or the people who built it. I think that's really where I truly, I guess you'd say, um, I don't know, where it became like second nature to me, or it kind of absorbed into me, you know? It wasn't something that I just knew and could recite to people or like write on a whiteboard. You know, it was something that I could do, like a skill, like riding a bike or something. So yeah, that's a long answer, but I guess everything, it's kind of the same thing with Japanese. It's like, how did you learn Japanese? Or maybe how did you learn a different language that you learned? Yes. Like it's really a lot of different things. And I think you really just have to follow what makes you excited and what feels fun to you, right? So
Definitely, definitely. Yeah.
it's exciting to build your
Um,
own thing, you know?
Exactly. And as you mentioned, like learning to program, learning to code is just like any other skill, and you need to practice. It takes practice to be good at it. And a very important thing is to start building start building something, no matter how stupid or how small it is. If you just
Right.
start building something, you really start to get many more things. Yeah. So one question we have from someone in the audience. Ayush is asking, what's your favorite programming language? I think you mentioned a few programming languages. What's your favorite so far?
Yeah. Ah, my favorite. That's so hard at this point, you know. I feel like early on you have a favorite and then you really get stuck to that and that's like your native language. Like you learn all the core concepts in that language. For me, that was C++ plus plus because C++
Okay.
plus plus was what I used in school and that's really where I got all the fundamentals. So it's kind of like the language I was raised on, I guess, right? And I have an affinity for C++, plus plus, but it is really difficult to be very productive with it, I think. Um, I used Ruby a lot at Progate, which I really learned to love Ruby at Progate actually. And then I used JavaScript as well. But I would say overall, what's the most like pleasure to work with is probably Python because like just recently for a personal project, I was trying to do some work with like video, like chopping up videos and like processing them in different ways. And actually, I think I couldn't have really done that in any other language than Python because there's just so many libraries and resources available in the language, which is amazing, you know. And it makes you feel like you have superpowers, you know, when you use Python. It's cool. JavaScript's similar for the web, definitely. But I would say probably Python. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great choice. And Python is in all the surveys like GitHub survey or Stack Overflow survey. And
Mhm.
last year when Python has overtook Java.
I will say over here in the Silicon Valley area, I wasn't expecting as much Python to be used, but it's definitely very heavily used. Yeah.
Yeah. So the next question I have for you, Nate, is how did you get your job, or how has been your job
Yeah.
journey so far? Yeah.
Yeah. So Well, the first job I actually got in tech that wasn't my internship was through just searching online, actually. So I searched for people posting online. I think there was a website called Dice or something like that at the time, and there was a job posting on there, and that was in Los Angeles. Um, so that was the first one. The internship was through word of mouth, so someone just recommended me to apply to it, and I applied. Um, yeah, and then through Progate was kind of like, I guess I knew people who were involved in Progate, and then it kind of naturally led to that. So that was a little bit of an unusual, I guess, thing too. But it's not really that unusual, actually. That's really common, I think. But it's not what you think of as the typical way to get a job, I guess. So, but with Apple, they actually reached out to me, and I think it was probably by making myself available online. Like I think at Progate, everyone. I think the team like pushed you to be more available online or more visible online. So we had like profiles for the equivalent of LinkedIn on in Japan, which is called Wantedly. So if you want to get a job in Japan, make a Wantedly. And then LinkedIn as well, and like blog posts, stuff like that will make you more visible, right? So I'm not really sure how, they never really told me, but they found me. And I think if you just make yourself available, you put yourself out there, people will find you because they want to hire you, right? So they reached out to me and then went through the interview process actually remotely while I was in Japan, and then flew in for an interview for the final interview. And there were a lot of them, a lot of interviews. So
What's the
yeah,
interview
so
process?
one more time.
The interview process, like someone is asking.
Yeah, so the interview process was initially just chats on the phone, and then there was a I think it's called a technical screening call. And technical screening call was, it's pretty intense over the phone because it's like you always worry about network issues and all that stuff too, and it can reflect badly on you, especially from Japan and the US. But they had like some kind of interactive coding type thing, like what you would see on online, really. I will say that the questions they weren't like the crazy like abstract questions, but they were very unique. They weren't the questions I had heard before. So I'd say while it's not hard to prepare for general questions, it is hard to get the exact questions they ask because they're pretty good,
Right,
at making new questions. And then the
right.
ones actually in-person interview, it was like a series of many interviews. And so that was that wasn't really as intense, to be honest, technically speaking, but it was very strenuous because it was like 5 consecutive interviews with small breaks between. So it was a very, I was tired at the end of the day, very tired. Not even just because of jet lag. But yeah, that's how it went. I also actually interviewed with Google in Japan, and um, that was a little bit different. It was funny because it was bilingual, so they were constantly changing languages. Um, but overall it was pretty similar. Yeah, pretty similar. Phone calls and stuff like that. Yeah. Yeah.
Good to hear that. And
In a word, intense.
yeah, totally understand that. So Vaibhav is asking a question. I think many students might have this question that how did you focus on, so his question is how to remember so many languages like Python, Ruby, or C++ at the same time. So what's your take on
Yeah.
that?
Mm.
Uh, yeah,
Well, it's actually really hard. So I have a recommendation here. So I think typically engineers, I don't want to, this sounds a little bit maybe derogatory or something, but I think it tends to be the case in the web world because you're already in a web browser and you're working online and you're using tools that are very open source and open, like like React or something. People will typically just Google things like constantly, just look it up online, have a page open that's like a reference. Because I mean, it's like if you're a mathematician and you don't remember like your times tables and the 3 digits or something. Like no one really is doing arithmetic like that if they're a mathematician, right? So a software engineer is more about higher level concepts and higher level things. I think if you focus too much on the details, like you forgot, you know, some, I don't know, some like string method, you know, you forget the name of it or something. Each language is a bit different, right? If you remember that, like, it's great if you can remember it like very fluidly, but you don't have to. Don't think that that is like, don't think that that will make you a bad programmer, because the best programmers I've seen will forget things like that and they have to look it up. So the recommendation I'll give is something called Dash, D-A-S-H. It's a tool actually that someone at Progate I saw using, and it's basically like I think it's an Electron app like Slack, or like I think VS Code too. You download, and then it has the docs imported for you, so you can quickly reference them without. And it's very good. It puts the documentation in a very good way. So refer to the docs constantly, and then it becomes muscle memory kind of at a certain point. But I will say that if you have to switch between two drastically different languages, I think there's not much hope that you'll be able to do it fluidly. For me, for my work now, and even at Progate, it's mostly at least one or two languages in a day, you know, or I would say even more on like a project. So you have a project that's heavily on one language, like Python for like a week, or like C++ for a few days. So you just have to like do a little bit of refreshing. And I will say that most of the languages I use, I think in general, are like C style. So like C, if you like do it in mother tongues, it's like a group of languages that are similar to C, right? So they don't differ that much. It's more about the libraries you're using and the tools you're using. So it gets more
Right.
specific, I'd say. Yeah.
So even at Progate, Nate, we always, during the sessions like this, and everyone, whenever I get an opportunity, I always try to tell everyone that you don't have to worry about learning so many languages. You just
Yeah.
have to what you like the most.
Hmm.
Definitely, do that. You might want to try them, but don't worry about learning them all. So once you master, for example, let's say Python or let's say JavaScript, then whenever, as you mentioned, like at most you're only working at one or two languages, and it
Hmm.
depends on the you're working on. So once you are
Yeah.
comfortable in a particular language, and whenever some other requirement can come, you anyway have to like brush up some fundamentals, and then if you already have good fundamentals, then you can move to those whenever, as and when required.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. We have a
I would say,
question.
oh, sorry.
Yeah, yeah.
Go
Please,
ahead.
please go ahead. Go
I was
ahead.
just going to say, so if you learn Python very well, for example, just take Python for example, and you want to do something that Python is very good at, and then you use it to build something, and you've finished that project. Then you move on to another project, and your main tool is Python, right? And you want to build something else, but you find that Python's not the best tool for that. It's not the best thing to use for that, right? I think that will tell you what language you need to use, right? Like, what is the language good at? And then, so focus on the mission, focus on the goal, not the language. The language is just a path, right? So, yeah.
Yeah, that's so true. That it's only a tool. It's not everything. So what matters is your end goal, as you mentioned, and what matters is what you're trying to do with it. So
Yeah.
definitely,
Yeah.
even for like a lot of, for example, JavaScript frameworks out there. A lot of questions we keep getting, like, what framework do I use? Do I use Angular? Do I use React?
That's
And I
tough. That's tough.
so I tell them that all the frameworks, all these popular ones are good. They all have their pros and cons. So what matters is not the framework itself, not the tool itself. What matters is what your goal is, what you're trying to build. If you're just trying to build a simple to-do app or like a simple website for your portfolio, you don't need a
Yeah.
heavy framework for that. You can just do it
Right.
with like vanilla JS as well. So
Yeah. Yeah.
uh,
Definitely.
yeah, definitely. Yeah, so let's moving ahead. We have a question, very good question. What do you do when you get stuck in some complicated coding problem? How's your
Mm,
approach?
that's difficult. So, well, okay. I will say that if you are really stuck and you find yourself frustrated, probably the best thing to do is just stop. Just stop for like 5 minutes or 10 minutes and do something else. Go get coffee if you drink coffee or tea. Take a little walk. Because really, I think programmers have a tendency to be too focused. And one of my coworkers now, he always says you can't see the forest for the trees. It's a saying, like, you get too focused on an individual tree, the problem you're trying to solve. And you need to take a step back. And the context switching of taking a walk or looking at something far away, not too close to your face, will really help you. It really does. And walking specifically, I think, helps me think through things. And even just turning away from it for a little bit will help you, okay? It sounds so counterintuitive, but it really does work a lot of times, especially if you get emotionally like frustrated, because I know that happens to everyone. Now, I will say if you're on a project with a team, if you're not working alone, then I would say try to describe what your problem is in words to your teammate, to someone else. If you can just describe what the problem is very accurately to them, odds are that you will realize the problem before they can give you advice or give you the answer. But there's also a chance that they may provide the answer for you as well. So I think that's twofold. It's a very good strategy to very precisely or very clearly explain to them what your problem is, what's happening, right? Take it step by step, not too detailed, but step by step, and explain it to them, right? And then, there's always referring to the docs. Google the error message, that's the typical stuff. That's really what people do, I mean, in a lot of cases. I mean, when there are cases, I'll say professionally, where you're dealing with proprietary stuff or private stuff that you can't Google. So you really have to work on your problem solving, at that point. It's better if you, that's another reason it's good if you use open source, because everyone's seen the same problems,
Yep.
Yeah.
That's a really great answer, and I'm sure a lot of them, if you missed any part of it, please make sure you see the recording and how do you deal with problems. Getting to the core of the problem is the key here. Lot of learners, what they do, that they straight away just start looking for a solution without even understanding the problem well. Yeah. So I think
try to limit. If you're trying to search online, try to limit the words that you put in your search. That will help. Just semantically limiting down precisely what you want to search for, because the more words you include, the more like variety of answers you'll get, right? So be very precise about what you're searching for if you're going to search for it, right? So
yeah. We have a very good question from Sundaram Gupta. She's saying that she's not from a CS background, and she's teaching herself programming. She has already learned the fundamentals, some algorithms as well. So what would be the suggestion to get a first job, to get a decent job?
Okay. Well, from a kind of interpersonal standpoint, I would say use the assets you have that are not CS related. So if you have a background or an interest in music or in like architecture or something, or physics, like a natural science, because programming goes with anything. It's like rice, right? Like rice goes with any food, right? Or bread. So just think of programming as the bread or the rice, and then you have the spicy like curry, or you have whatever, the other stuff. So think about what you have that pairs well with programming, and then you need to like make your resume or like your approach with that in mind. Okay. So I didn't particularly do that, but I'd say I definitely was interested in education, and I liked education, and I worked as a teacher before. So Progate was a natural call for me. It was really natural, and it felt really great to go into that position. And I think if you can find something like that, it won't only help you get the job, it'll help you enjoy your job. I think a lot of people don't emphasize that, but if you find a job you really enjoy, that's a lifelong treasure. So you should really try that. So try to think about what you can do to pair with programming. In terms of acquiring the skills or getting the skills from a non-technical background, I would say start with like Unix and Linux fundamentals, like command line stuff, because a lot of times when I see people coming from non-technical backgrounds, it's not the algorithms, it's not the data structures that they don't have a good grasp on. It's lower than that. It's like command line stuff, or like computer culture almost, like it's something more like that. I don't know exactly what I'm trying to describe here, but It's like, how do you move files from the command line or something like that? I don't know. That kind of lower level stuff is a lot of times what I have trouble with communicating with someone who's less technical or doesn't have a CS background or something, which they
Yeah.
didn't teach me in CS. It's just from being in the culture, you know? So,
Yeah.
yeah.
And I totally relate to that, and I actually and these already know that a lot of engineers at Progate back in our
Mhm.
headquarters in
Mhm.
Tokyo, they do not have a CS background. They made it
Yeah,
their
that's true.
way to Progate by learning
Yes.
themselves, and even a lot of our colleagues we work every day, they do not have a CS background, but they're working as an
Yeah.
engineer.
Because
Yeah.
they learned by doing. You can tell they really learned because they love doing it and they learned by doing and making. That's the best way to learn, yeah.
Definitely. And the best story which I have, I always plug it in everywhere I can, is Tomohiro Subaki.
Oh, yeah.
So he didn't have any CS background. He was a sales professional at
Mhm.
Mitsubishi just few years ago. And then he started learning to code on Progate, coincidentally, and he ended up
Yeah,
joining Progate as an engineer.
that's so cool.
And yeah, so that is we already have like his story on the success story page if you anyone would like to have a look. Next
Yeah.
question I have for you, Nate, is how's your workday like? We would like to know more
Yeah,
about.
so it's very interesting. So I have a long commute. I have like an hour and a half commute or something like that on a bus. So that's one way. And I've lived in different places since I've moved here, so closer to the office or kind of far away. One thing that's interesting that I think is not typical. Okay, I'll say first of all, most of the day it's a typical day. I come in, I check my emails, I talk to people, get kind of a status or like reframing of what I'm doing, check my calendar, all that kind of stuff, like typical stuff, right? And I'd say a lot of times in the morning it's like pull request stuff, like looking at pull requests, approving, getting approval for pull requests, merging code, and starting some like longer, I guess, automated scripts that will like run throughout the day or something like that. If there's anything that I can like just start and like let go of, I do that before lunch or get that going before lunch. And around lunch, I usually have several meetings, like a meeting or two every day, and then sometimes a little extra. And then in the evening, for me, my rhythm is more like real concentration happens at around 3 to like 6 p.m. So that's when I really focus in and get in what they call like the zone or whatever, and really try to like hammer out some code or whatever, or like try to really solve some problems technically, I guess. For me, that's just how my rhythm goes. I think a lot of people do that in the morning. Even some of my coworkers, they come in a little early and they say they're most productive first thing in the morning before you get into those meetings and all that stuff, which I can understand. I think that's happened to me a few times. I'm pretty irregular, honestly, my schedule. But one thing that is unique, I think, about my position is that there's this small town down in Silicon Valley that has all these different offices, and I think a lot of people move from office to office. So you'll be going to a different office for a one meeting or like a project that'll take you there. So it's kind of like you're traveling, but you're just traveling different buildings in the same town, which is, I think it's pretty cool. It's something I didn't experience much in my other jobs. So I like that. And then what else can I say about my day? Well, there are a lot of events at the company. So, sometimes you'll just have an event that you go to or like attend kind of like what would be like a conference or something, or like a class or lecture or something like that. So it feels a little bit like college sometimes. That's pretty cool. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. That's pretty exciting, I would say.
Yeah.
I have a question from Saurabh. He's asking that I'm sure, like you mentioned a little bit, I think we can go a little bit deeper on that. Is he's asking how to start implementing the skills or the language you have learned.
For a long time, it feels like you can't make that transition. You feel like you're either just regurgitating what's been given to you, or just copying something or something like that. But so I know that frustration. There's like a valley that happens when you're learning, and I think that's true of a lot of things. It's not just coding, but it feels like that a lot with coding. So learning by example is really important. So what you can do, I think a lot of people focus on being able to write code, like original code. But realistically, when you get a job, especially at a larger company, there's going to already be so much code there that you won't be writing much new code. I mean, it depends, but the odds are you'll be maintaining or updating or something like that, right? So it's very important to be able to read other people's code. So I would start by finding a repo that on GitHub, for example, or GitLab, that is not too big for you to not understand. So you find a repo that's you can understand most of it. Clone it, download it, and just start messing with it. Just yeah, there's no consequences, right? Just remove some parts and see what happens. And just by just like trying that process by changing, you'll think of new things that you want to do, new things you want to add, and then you'll be able to be creative and start adding new stuff to it, right? I think that's a great way to learn, and I would try that. I think experimenting with that, you'll start to feel like you're really creating something and you're really applying something, right? Other than that, it's kind of a strange process, like mysterious almost even to me. You have like aha moments and you feel like, oh, I've done something creative and new now. But it's hard. You just have to, I would say, just stick with it. Just stick with it. Do things, don't torture yourself. Don't just do like problems that are difficult all the time. Do fun stuff and find stuff that's really interesting to you, and challenging, but you should find something that excites you. Something that's like, oh, this is so cool. How does this work? You know, like that. That's what you need to work on. That's what you need to use to learn. And then you'll get there. Don't give up.
Not giving up is the most important part. And as you correctly mentioned, yeah, is that a lot of time you're not even writing code, you're like doing other things, which are also key part of being a developer, like reading other
So
people,
crucial.
communicating with other developers. And then even if you're writing code, making sure that it's readable to others, so that because you're not one person in the team, that it's a large team, and often you have to collaborate, right? Yeah, and I totally agree with that point. The one which you mentioned, especially making it fun. A lot of learners, what they do is that they take most of these monotonous things which are which might be popular among in around them, and they think that's coding. But actually, you can have a lot fun, right? You can make a game, or you can make it like like a quiz, anything, and you can show it to someone, and they will be surprised. Hey, how did you do that? And when you hear that's amazing, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Definitely.
And in the process, you learn a lot. You find new ways to do things and all that. Yeah.
I mean, a great motivation, like you said, a game, or some personal interest, like you want to surprise or make someone laugh. Another thing is pranking people. Maybe I'll get in trouble for saying this, but like, for example, like I remember a long time ago, we made a little web page for one of my coworkers. This was before Progate, because it was his birthday, and we threw up this page and just did some stupid, silly stuff. And it was really fun and exciting. It was just a way to use programming in a funny way that surprised him, and he was happy because it was his birthday, and we sent him a link to the page, and he opens it up, and it's like this birthday message, And it's not something like technologically amazing, but it was really fun, and we used code to do it, So everything you do like that, it makes you better.
Exactly. That sounds pretty fun. And I just would like to take a moment to give a shout out to some folks who have joined, and they're answering other people's question. That's
awesome.
That's awesome, right? Like Carrie, you're answering other people's question. That's amazing. Like a lot of people, they just join, but very few contribute back, and you are the ones, those who are. That's pretty awesome.
Kudos to you. That's awesome.
Nate, Nate, I have another question for you. Is like, what tools or resources do you use? They could be programming related or not programming related, in your day-to-day, work, or any tools you would recommend to new programmers out there. You already mentioned about Dash, which was pretty cool. Yeah. Any other mentions you would have?
Yeah, I would say in some cases, it's hit or miss, but So of course, like Stack Exchange and Stack Overflow are resources. I will say that you need to get good at filtering out things that are, they look like related to what you want to learn or what you want to do, but make sure you read carefully because it can be very similar. Like for example, you have a question about a web service you want to make and it's in Python, and you just quickly see like web service and some task and you start reading through the answers, right? You skip down to the answers. But it's Python 2.7, it's not Python 3.x. So then you start to do all this and you mess everything up because it's a different version of Python or something like that. So be careful when you do that. Don't just copy and paste everything, right? It'll frustrate you more if you do that. Take your time. That's another thing, like taking a step back, you know, because if you get too anxious to solve whatever problem you're trying to solve, you might end up making it worse. So just be careful about that. But like I was gonna say Reddit. So Reddit is sometimes useful. I wouldn't say very often, but so there are some subreddits that are like learning. I think it's called Learn Programming or Learning Programming, and it's not always the most helpful, but sometimes you can find something that's very similar and you read a few comments, and I would say it's a good starting point because a lot of people will share resources there and pool them together, you know. Another one would be Medium posts. So on Medium, there are a lot of great posts on there. DigitalOcean, strangely enough, especially web stuff, DigitalOcean is they're a host provider, but they have great articles and tutorials. So a lot of times they'll come up in Google searches. And then books, like O'Reilly books are great. I actually really like books for diving into a new language. So if I have a book on Elixir, actually, that's really good from O'Reilly books. And like, especially on a weekend, if you have nothing to do on the weekend or like you want to just make a day to do this, it's good sometimes to sit down with a book and go through things. I mean, you shouldn't expect to learn everything you want from the book, but it is really good, I think, sometimes to sit down and learn from the book because you really absorb it really well, I think, when you sit down and focus on a book. But I don't know, that's not for everybody. Videos are also a big thing. Like if I want to get a high level view of something, like someone just tells me about some concept and I want to get the high level of that, like Wikipedia and YouTube, right? To just get a high level. And then, I mean, something like, for example, scikit-learn or something, I would go to the docs for that. Like try to find the documentation on it. So if they have if they have a GitHub repo, that would be one. If they have an official page, or if they have like, let's see, well, if it's in Dash or something like that, you really try to read through it and you know, don't read it like scripture or something. Just go through it like at a high level. But yeah, it's hard. Because it's different for every person. You know, some people love video and then some people hate it. You know, so.
And I think the hidden message right there, definitely you mentioned a lot of good tools, and totally to everyone who is listening, it's up to you. He mentioned about the tools, but it's up to you which tool you would want to apply at what particular position. And as he has, every person has different choices. So some would prefer to learn from, let's say, from and definitely, as you mentioned about different tools. So I think a message for everyone there is that it's not A versus B. It's always A and B, right? You need to combine different resources sometimes to solve particular thing, to do some particular thing. So don't think that you would be able to get that one perfect resource which will solve your entire problem. It doesn't. It's an ideal situation. It doesn't happen. You need to combine multiple things together, like videos or documentations and different things. I think that's a good message also there.
For sure.
Yeah.
Totally agree.
Nate, we a lot of good insights you have already given, and I'm sure a lot of learners who are here, they might have learned something new. So can anyone just everyone who is listening, can you tell me, have you learned something new so far? It can be small or big. You just let me know, like yes or something. Yeah, you have learned something new today. Or you can give me a thumbs up in the comments. Yeah, let's keep that energy high because this is the weekend, and like even though during these times, specific times, weekend and
Mm,
weekdays are not pretty much different, but definitely,
yeah.
they all have a good opportunity to learn new skills.
Oh,
And
it's great. Yeah.
yeah, so a lot
I
of
mean,
them, yeah,
yeah, it's almost bad to say, but it's a really great time if you look at it as an opportunity. Stay safe, stay indoors, and study. Yeah, hit the books. It's a great time for it, honestly. And, keep you
definitely.
safe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So some students have asked about web development. So this
Mm,
isn't specifically about web development, but I can like little bit mention about that. So Yuvraj is asking about a small roadmap. So web development,
mm,
I think, requires you to be comfortable with JavaScript, because JavaScript is the language
mm,
of the web. And even before
yeah.
you do that, you need to understand how web works. So try to figure out those fundamentals, like how web works, how a website works, how that things go, how front end, back end, what are those, how they come together, and everything, and then start
Hmm.
learning these skills. Definitely, like HTML, CSS, JavaScript, the building blocks. You need to be really comfortable with these, and then definitely after once you're comfortable with JavaScript, which we call vanilla JS, a lot of things you can do with vanilla JS as well. And then
Hmm.
it depends on your case, as I mentioned, depends on your case. You can choose to learn different frameworks out there. React we already have on Progate. You can give it a try, but only after
Hmm.
learning JavaScript. So
Yeah.
that's a brief roadmap. Anything you would like to add, Nate, about web development?
I would say yeah, it is really useful to know it on a kind of a hardware level, I guess, right? Like, at least the basics and like how the internet works, yeah, and what is a web browser? What is a web browser actually doing? A lot of people don't really think about that, but I think it is really useful to know that stuff later on. Um, as you start to create new stuff, if you want to create new stuff, you need to really know those things, I think. So,
Yeah,
yeah, but you
and
summed it up really well. Yeah.
yeah, sure thing. So Nate, any suggestions or tips for the beginners out there? Many of them might have just started their journey. In fact, we
Mhm.
are also running 21 days of code challenge on
Oh,
Progate.
cool.
So
That's awesome.
they can make use of this time at home to learn new skills. And the focus there is on consistency, as you would also agree that a lot of programmers, as as developers, we tend to like take a lot at once. We just decide, oh,
Mhm.
I am going to code for like 8 hours. 8 hours today,
Yes.
but that's not how it's
Yeah.
supposed to be,
Yeah.
right? Consistency is very
Yeah.
important over, I would say, load. Do not, as you mentioned, like do not torture yourself. So for that consistency, we are running this 21 days of code challenge. And the challenge here is that learn at least, maybe force yourself to learn at least 21 minutes. That's a tiny part of your day every day
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
next 21 days.
I was gonna say, I was just talking to a friend about this the other day. I think a lot of times, I don't know if it's something just for programmers, but a lot of times people want to set their goals really high, and I think that's
Right.
great to set them really high, like build a Facebook, build a YouTube, like clone YouTube, and that's awesome. But I think with programming, for whatever reason, it tends to be almost the opposite. Like if you set your goal really low, like you almost think it's like it's beneath you, like it's embarrassing to try to accomplish just a small thing. But if you set the goal really low, it sounds really strange to say it's almost demotivation or something. But if you just set it really low, it's like a bait. You'll do it and you'll accomplish it, and then that accomplishing the small thing will make you want to do a lot more. And then you have to
Right.
stop yourself. So I think that's a good way to think about it too. Like it's kind of a flipping it's on its head of like the dream big kind of style or something. Yeah.
Yeah.
But
That's so true, right? You need to keep your barrier to entry very low so that you don't get
yeah.
intimidated in the beginning. And then definitely they need to celebrate each small win. Small wins matter, right?
Yeah.
Like, for
Hmm.
example, once you've just started Hello World, definitely. And then after that, you have made your first app, maybe it's a to-do app or just a calculator. Celebrate that, put it out
Yeah.
into GitHub and then share everyone like, you built this from scratch. That's a good achievement. And definitely, you
Definitely.
can step by step you can move forward. So yeah, Nate, I was actually asking like what suggestion you have already made, mentioned that. Anything you would
Hmm.
like to add to that? Like any tips for specifically for beginners, absolute beginners who are just getting started?
I mean, honestly, from what I've seen online, so I use an app called Duolingo for language, and A
Yeah.
lot of people say like, there are so many resources online, right? But I think for a total beginner, it needs to be fun and it doesn't need to be overwhelming, right? It needs to be interactive. And I think, like, honestly, I think Progate is a really great resource for that. Like, just get on Progate and start something, if you're a complete beginner. Yeah, it's like one of the best places to start. And then even for advanced stuff like React, I wouldn't dive right into the React course. Like Yash said, it's a complicated thing, especially for very beginners. It might discourage you. But start with some language you like that's related to something you want to do. Um, let's see, places to start. Yeah. Um, hmm. Learning the language, learning like what can you do with the programming language and do the basic things. Yeah.
Right.
And like Yash said, celebrate the small victories for sure. Document them. Keep notes on them. Yeah.
Right, right. Someone mentioned, I think his AYMUS, Progate is Duolingo of coding languages.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it is. Yeah, it is. Yeah, Duolingo. Yeah, exactly. It looks and feels similar, and it's really fun. It's fun.
Yeah. Any piece of motivation, any favorite quote of yours you would like to say for everyone who is just watching?
Well, I'd really like to emphasize that um, trying to build something on your own is, I think, really important. And even if I wouldn't even say earlier we talked about this, but even if it's not starting from scratch, you're never truly starting from scratch, right? Because you're not building a computer, you know. So even if it's not starting from scratch, try to make something on your own and own it, like call it your own and create it. I think that is the best way to really feel like you've learned something, you become independent that way, right? And
Yeah,
put it out there, get feedback from your friends, from your family, from your little brother, from your sister, and hear what they say, and it'll just give you ideas and spark your curiosity. I think that's what's really important. Um,
yeah,
yeah, building something on your own is really important, I think. So read other
that.
people's code, try to understand it. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Nate. That's very helpful, very inspiring, and I'm sure a lot of them have learned many new things. And keep learning, stay safe, stay indoors, and then make the most out of this time at home. Thank you, Nate.
Yeah,
We'll see
thanks,
you around.
Yash. Stay safe, guys, and keep going. Don't give up.